So we've had a little bit of time to sink our teeth into Phase 2 of Ashes of Creation. So far, the reviews from the community are a little bit mixed. Some people are having a lot of fun with the game. I would say I'd put myself into this camp. But other people are a little bit disappointed with the amount of new content we got at the launch of Phase 2, which I totally understand. So in this video, we're going to be doing a good, bad, and the ugly of Phase 2 of Ashes of Creation. Let's start off with the good things. And contrary to what some content creators will tell you, there's actually a lot of good things with Phase 2. The number one most impressive thing has got to be the technical performance. Right now, they are pushing 6,000 concurrent players into the Riverlands, into one zone. And when the servers first came up, there were 6,000 people all in the starter area. There were people everywhere. And for the most part, the game was holding up. The servers weren't crashing. It wasn't, 30-second delays. Yes, there was some lag, especially in some areas. But for the most part, the game was handling 6,000 people concurrently on each server in the starter zone. And not even in the Riverlands, in the starter segments of the Riverlands. That is incredibly impressive. And to put these numbers into context, New World at launch had a max server concurrency across all of the zones, including instances, at 2,000. And right now they are pushing 6,000 plus in the Riverlands. And the game is holding up really well. My client frame rate, pretty fantastic. Yes, there is some lag. Yes, there is some server stability things. And yes, you do crash every now and then. But for the most part, it's pretty impressive how well it's running. And keep in mind, they have 1.5 to 2 years, according to their own timelines and their own development funding runway, to further iterate on this. It's incredibly impressive. Right now, Ashes of Creation in the alpha, at this current moment, in terms of handling lots of players on screen at once and large player concurrency, is doing it better than almost all of the currently released MMOs. I'm really blown away with how well the game is running with the amount of players on screen and how early it is. The next thing that's really good are the new races. The Dunir Dwarves are pretty fantastic. I think most dwarf enjoyers are appreciating the direction they went with the Dunir Dwarves. They have pretty good character customization. You can do a lot with them. I'm currently playing a Dunir Dwarf. I made my person kind of silly looking. I like doing that. At least until the Nakua come out, I'll probably be a Dunir. But I think a lot of the dwarf enjoyers are appreciating the Dunir race. And the desert people, I can't think of their name. They have a weird name. I think it's something with a V. They also pretty cool. So I think the new races came out pretty well, and that's sort of something that's easy to forget. The next thing I'm really enjoying is that despite Intrepid being on their winter vacation right now, and there being nobody officially in the offices, they are deploying fixes rapidly. If something is broken, like Party Experience got broken for like a little bit, and they were like immediately on it at like 3 a.m. They are deploying hot fixes and patches and fixing spawn rates and things like that, like almost immediately. It's really impressive, especially when it's like 2 or 3 a.m. and Steven's blowing up the Discord saying servers come down, they'll be back up in 30 minutes, like that kind of stuff. I don't know. I've really been impressed with the amount of like customer service and just attention to these issues. They don't let them linger. So I'm really liking that. The next thing I'm really enjoying about Ashes is the general busyness of the game. This actually feels like a real MMO. Now, this was a thing in Phase 1, but this is especially true in Phase 2 with all of the servers condensed down to 3. There are people everywhere doing everything. You are stumbling upon people. World of Warcraft just feels like you're in your own little private instance anymore. And to go from that to this is nice. You just see people doing stuff, and there's kind of a buzz about. And yes, it can be annoying when things are overpopulated, especially at the start of Phase 2. This has gotten better as people have spread out and the level bands have, just naturally dispersed people. Spawn rates got fixed. So the downsides of this are much better now. So if you stop playing for that reason, maybe jump back in because they've increased spawn rates and naturally the problem is sort of solved itself. But yes, I'm really enjoying that. I am liking that there's more and more PvP as time goes on. Phase 2 has definitely had a lot more PvP. The competition and the amount of contested, lucrative areas, like people are flagging up, and it's getting a little scrappy, and I'm liking that. I think I'm level 11 or 12, and I've gotten into quite a few PvP scraps myself. Not really going out of my way to do it, but they just sort of happened. And I'm having fun with that. The next thing I like is the new Befallen Forge dungeon. I'm looking forward to them further fleshing this out and just further fleshing out additional architecture. Right now, we pretty much only have the human architecture, but we're going to be seeing a lot of different art styles, and I'm really curious to see how they go with like the desert architecture and the Nakua architecture and the orc, whatever they're called, the architecture. I'm looking forward to the different flavors of the game. Right now, we're only kind of experiencing the one human flavor, and I think most people are liking that. So looking forward to see what they do with that. And the final thing I'm enjoying is that right now, the servers are up 24/7 outside of like server restarts. Until January 6th, the servers are up 24/7, so you can get in and play. And even outside of past January 6th, the servers are still going to be up 5+ days a week. So you're going to largely be able to play the game whenever you want to, which is going to be pretty cool. Now let's get into the bad things. And the number one most obvious bad thing was the start of Phase 2 was a little bit of a clusterfuck. For the first 2 days, you really couldn't do much because there were so many people fighting over limited mobs, and the respawns were bugging, and things were spawning under the world. So there was a lot of contributing factors having all the players in a very small area with the mobs bugging, with the respawns not working. And it honestly wasn't very great. I was playing some Marvel Rivals a little bit during that time, but if you stopped playing the game because of that, I can tell you as of right now, it is a night and day difference. They have upped the respawns by about 35%, but in addition to that, they've also fixed some of the buggy respawns, and also the problem has sort of fixed itself because you had everybody at level 1 trying to level in that, super condensed area. It was kind of like a perfect storm of a bunch of different factors. So it is a night and day difference with the fixed respawns, with the increased spawn rate, and with people spreading out. If that was something that was bothering you, jump back in now. It's going to be a totally different experience. I'm like level 12. I haven't experienced this problem nearly at all as of recently. But I expect that, at max level, which is when it matters, at max level, there absolutely is going to be some competition for those high level, gear farming spots, which is good because that's when the PvP starts. But at level 1, like you're not really going out there PvPing and fighting over the hot spots because it's not really the same vibe. Next up, we have resource bottlenecks. Right now, it is a meth head's nightmare and that you cannot find copper anywhere. Now, I'm not somebody that's a gatherer or a crafter, but it seems that this is genuinely a real problem because I'm seeing it complained about everywhere from everybody that crafts or gathers. And right now, there are certain resources that you need that you can't find that are such limited quantities that it is completely hamstringing an entire element of the game. So hopefully they will alleviate this and fix the respawns or fix the nodes, or something's going to have to be done because it's really, really, harming the mental of a lot of these crafters and gatherers right now that are just going crazy trying to find copper or whatever sort of resource they can't find. And the final bad thing is a little bit of a prediction, and that is that I think that player drop-off is going to be pretty significant in Phase 2. Not for a while. Right now, Phase 2 is totally popping. There's players everywhere. It's almost annoying how many people are playing this game right now. But I think that in about a month or two, people are going to start dropping off and taking a break from the game because we have a lot more access to play the game. And there's not the same urgency. Back in Phase 1, you could only play on the weekends, and even on the weekends, there was a lot of server downtime because things would just break, so you just couldn't play the game as much. And now we have, a week plus where we can play the game 24/7 whenever we want to, and then even after January 6th, we can still play the game 5 days a week. There's not going to be that same urgency to get on and play, and not only that, we know the game a lot better. We already played Phase 1. A lot of people figured out a lot of the things that sort of, take time to do. So they're naturally going to be faster at playing the game, and they have more time to play the game, and they're more efficient at playing the game. So, yeah, I think people are going to blow through the limited content there is in the game because there's more time, less urgency. They're better at it, and information is dispersing. And right now, the core game loops just aren't really in there. You had the leveling, you have some of the node stuff, but in terms of the long-term game loops, a lot of that stuff still isn't in the game right now. So I fully expect that, a month or two from now, Phase 2 might be a little dormant, but that's part of the reason I think they condensed the servers. Yes, they did want to test the concurrency, but also I do think there's going to be some pretty significant drop-off until we get some of the more robust game loop systems that are more evergreen in the game. And now let's get into the downright ugly of Phase 2. And the number one complaint, and probably the most justified complaint, is that Phase 2 is just not that different from Phase 1. As of the recording of this video, right now at this very moment in Phase 2, it's really not all that different. There's not a lot of new content that expands upon what we had previously. Yes, we have much better player concurrency. Yeah, it's super cool that you have 6,000 people on one server. Yeah, we got some new races. Okay. Yeah, we got the Befallen Forge. That's cool, but you know, again, the level cap hasn't been raised. There's not a lot of new content from a 25 plus perspective. People heard that the desert and the tropics were going to be expanded, so when the servers came up, naturally people got on their mount and went out there to see the new stuff, and it just isn't there. Yes, you have new nodes in the desert and the tropics, but they're not developed. People haven't leveled those up yet. And I will defend Intrepid in that as you level up the nodes, the world around the node does change. That's the premise. But right now, as of the recording this video at the start of Phase 2, you go out to the desert, there's nothing there. It's the same thing that was there previously. So, yeah, I can see why people are a little upset when you see the trailer for the desert and it's like this super cool thing, and then you actually go out there and you're like, where is it? And maybe it's coming. Maybe that's part of what happens when the nodes level up. But again, when you jump in and your first impression, you see that and you're like, what? Like, that's not great. Next up, we have leveling. Leveling in Ashes of Creation is still mob grinding. That's basically what everyone does because that's the only meaningful way to gain experience. And I personally am kind of okay with the game leaning on mob grinding being the primary vector in which you gain experience, but it can't be the only thing. And I understand why they want mob grinding to be a big part of this game, because it does reinforce the social element. If you're playing World of Warcraft and you're solo questing, you don't talk to anybody. You're in your own little world doing your own little thing. You're just you're playing a fucking single player game. And with mob grinding, you have a lot more of these random social elements. You have that friction. You have, oh, that group over there is stealing our stuff. You just don't get that when you're doing solo questing. And I think some people want a solo questing experience. And I don't think that's the correct direction to go for a couple reasons. And we'll get to that in a minute. But they do need to break up the mob grinding being the only thing. There needs to be meaningful alternatives. They need to tune the town board quests to be worthwhile. Yes, a lot of the times they're just buggy, so they're just not even worth attempting to do because you're largely just going to run into a bug with them or some other thing that slows you down. So everyone for the most part still just grinding mobs. I think a lot of this is just a genuine tuning issue. Some of these other leveling systems are in the game, but again, the numbers wise, they're just not worth it, and a lot of people just aren't doing them. So that's not great. I would love to see the game be like 60. Like I would love if it's a pie chart. I would like to see 65% of your XP maybe come from mob grinding, and the rest come from events and quests and story arcs and things like that. And I know some people are like 65%. That's a lot. The thing with quests is that largely quests are just a disguise for mob grinding, and I just don't think that the direction Ashes is going, creating lots and lots of quests, is really worthwhile. I think quests in general, and I know this from WildStar's development, they're so expensive to make. They take so much time to make, so much money to make, and people blow through them immediately, and it's the first content in the game that becomes irrelevant. You know, think about World of Warcraft quests. They're relevant for a few months, and then you never do them again. The replayability is nearly zero, and then when the new expansion comes out, they're totally irrelevant. So I just don't think this content is super worth pursuing. And I do think, you know, the story arc stuff, yeah, you can tell the story of the game. I think that's fine. But like creating tons and tons and tons of bulk filler quests, I just don't think is worthwhile. In conclusion, I'm still having a ton of fun with Ashes of Creation, and I'm very optimistic with the direction the game is going. But I can't help but think that Phase 2 was sort of pushed out the door a little earlier than it should have been for the sheer fact of scheduling. In the video game industry, it is industry standard to give your employees, you know, a week and a half, 2 weeks, sometimes 3 weeks off in the winter. And if they didn't get us Phase 2 prior to them going on winter vacation, then we wouldn't have had it for at least 2 or 3 weeks. And I think they wanted to get us playing a new game version for the holidays because we just wouldn't have had anything if they didn't get it to us before, you know, when they did. I think they wanted the testing. I think they wanted us to be able to play something. And it makes sense. So if I had to guess, I think there's probably a lot of stuff that was really close to making it into Phase 2 that just didn't quite get there and had to get cut and couldn't make it on this version. So I'm really curious to see how big the next update we get for Phase 2 will be. I know we're going to be getting Rogue, which is something a lot of people are looking forward to, myself included. But I imagine there's probably a lot of stuff that is really close to being done that they just couldn't quite get out the door. I'm personally okay with Phase 2 being a little bit bare bones at the start because I'm still testing a lot of the classes and just learning the game at my own pace and just kind of taking it slow and easy. But I can understand how, the guys that have been max level and sweating their balls off since phase 1, I can see how they're maybe a little upset that these zones aren't more fleshed out and they don't have more new max level content. I get it. But I'm not worried, guys. I'm still very optimistic about this game because they have a lot of time. I think that's what a lot of people aren't understanding. They have, according to their own projections, this is their own internal projections, them not having to, get new seed money or anything. They have, a year and a half to 2 years to develop this game. A lot is going to happen between now and then because video game development is not linear. Once the systems and pipelines get built to, make the content, that stuff comes on a lot faster. What takes time is all the underlying systems, the things they're doing right now that they've done really good, the combat, the movement, the server architecture, all of that stuff being so good this early is really, really impressive. Because the thing about like creating new zones and new artwork, that stuff scales up much easier. You can hire new artists, you can literally outsource the art. That stuff comes online much, much faster. And once those content pipeline productions are built, it's just easier the second and third and fourth time you do it. But that underlying, the underlying stuff, you can't really scale that stuff up. You sort of have to do that in silence and in the dark and just hope you get it right. And they're getting a lot of the hard parts right. What a lot of people don't know about video game development and software development in general is that it's a complete clusterfuck until the 11th hour. Even highly reviewed games that you love, like The Witcher 3, that game in development was a complete fucking nightmare until the 11th hour where everything comes together. And the reason that happens like that is because, especially with video games, this system is contingent on this system, is contingent on this system. They all build off of each other, so none of them work until all of them work. So that's why it seems like that. So I'm just excited to see that Ashes of Creation, they are prioritizing the difficult and hard things right now that you cannot scale up. I am not worried about there only being, one really fleshed out zone, because that stuff is stuff that you can make. You can make new mob types, you can make new art, you can hire new artists, you can outsource the art. You can fix a lot of that stuff by throwing money at it. But what you can't throw money at is the underlying stuff, the feel, the combat design. We've learned through other MMOs that have insane budgets, that have lots of content and lots of fancy art and lots of zones and lots of things to do. You can't buy your way out of the problems that other MMOs have that Ashes of Creation is doing right. I think most people can agree that the combat in the game is pretty good, damn good. A lot of people like the direction of the combat. The bones of it for sure are good. Maybe you don't like your specific, maybe this mechanic could be better, whatever. But in terms of the feel, the movement feel, the sprinting, the jumping, the movement acceleration, the animations, the number text, that stuff that is so difficult to quantify and nail down, they're nailing that. The performance of the client is fucking fantastic at this phase. Again, they have 1.5 to 2 years to optimize and refine it. And that's not even talking about like NVIDIA drivers and other things that come online, later towards release. They're nailing that. The server performance with the amount of people on, this shit is hard to do. I remember New World. New World was a laggy piece of shit, and they own Amazon Web Services. They own the shit. So, dude, I'm pretty optimistic. Maybe I'm just, coping, but I just am really excited to see that the things that are important, they're really prioritizing. So yeah, that's the good, the bad, and the ugly of Ashes of Creation Phase 2. I'm having a blast. But I do fully expect that even players that are enjoying the game right now will probably taper off towards the later end of Phase 2 because they're just going to burn through the content as a lot of the end game loops just aren't in the game right now. That's fully expected. Heck, I might even, play a little bit more casually as time goes on. But for now, having a blast. I'm super excited.